So there's this scene in a movie called Men in Black. Anybody familiar with that movie? That I love. I absolutely love this particular scene. It's the scene that happens right after New York City officer James Darrell Edwards III realizes and is shown that the world does not include only humans. In this fictional scene, we see two men sitting on a park bench having a conversation. Agent K, the elder man on the bench, begins explaining what Officer Edwards has just witnessed and what exactly the secret agency MIB really is. It goes something like this. Agent K says, "All right, kid, here's the deal. At any given time, there are around 1,500 aliens on the planet. Most of them are right here in Manhattan. Most are decent enough. They're just trying to make a living. Humans, for the most part, don't have a clue. They don't want one either. They're happy. They think they have a good beat on things." To which Officer Edwards asks, "But why the big secret? People are smart. They can handle it." Agent K, in his wisdom, says, "A person is smart. People are dumb, panicky, dangerous animals, and you know it. 1,500 years ago, everyone knew the earth was the center of the universe. 500 years ago, everyone knew the earth was flat. And 15 minutes ago, you knew that people were alone on this planet." With a sigh, Agent K adds, "Imagine what you'll know tomorrow." And Officer Edwards then asks, "What's the catch?" "The catch," K says, "the catch is you will sever every human contact. Nobody will ever know you exist anywhere, ever." Kay pauses and then adds, "I'll give you to sunrise to think it over." As Kay begins to stroll away, Officer Edwards shouts, "Hey, is it worth it?" And Kay says, "Oh yeah, it's worth it." If you're strong enough, it's worth it. Is it worth it? It's a really profound question to ask. And let me just say that despite the fact that this movie is far-fetched and completely fictional, there are some other really profound statements in this movie that apply to our everyday life. But isn't that what movies are for, right? To challenge our thinking, to teach us through entertainment. And if you've not figured this out yet, I'm a bit of a movie buff. But I bring this up because it is a very profound question to ask of our lives as Christians. Is it worth it? I mean, really, is it? I think that is truly the question that Jesus asks of each of us when we commit ourselves to a life of Christianity and following his example. So let me set the stage to our story today. We are rapidly approaching the end of Jesus' ministry on this earth, the time when he enters Jerusalem for the last time. He has garnered a lot of attention, both positive and negative. There are folks who follow him just to hear what he has to say. There are folks who are likely following him to see what he'll do next, much like Officer Edwards, with more questions than answers. And there are definitely those who are following him around to report back to the Sanhedrin the things that he is doing that are punishable by death, according to Jewish and Roman law. He has likely garnered large crowds of people gathering at each stop, so much so that people are jockeying around him for position just to get close. Some probably hoping to have a healing done, to just touch the man that so many people are talking about. And that's where we find ourselves this week in the Gospel of Luke, just after we heard about Jesus eating with some of the folks in a Pharisee's home. and how he taught that we are to not think too highly of ourselves and not to use humility to get a better place at the table in the world, which emphasized that there is a fine line to walk when it comes to being the physical representation of Christ in this day and time. Now, there's another story about a banquet wedged in between this story of humility and this one. It is one similar to last week's passage that talks about how to be in this world. But here's the thing to really notice about these passages. It is at this point in Luke's gospel that we transition from the how to be a disciple to talking about what it means to be a disciple. And so as we continue on through the remainder of our Christian calendar, we are going to explore this idea of what discipleship means and what it costs us to commit ourselves to being a disciple, in an attempt to answer the question, is it really worth it? So what we have before us today is something hard to swallow. How many of you cringed when I read that part about hating mother and father, brother and sister, wife and children? That's hard to hear, right? But this is the hard-hitting teaching that Jesus has transitioned to. It is the teaching that we all need to hear. The transition that Luke takes us through is not soft or subtle. It's an abrupt, in-your-face kind of teaching. He literally switches from talking about how we are to be right into, yep, this could potentially cost you your life. He doesn't want anybody to be misconceived or misinformed about what this is all about. But if you think about it, there's really no way to soften that blow, is there? There's no easy way to say to someone, this may cost you your life to follow me. And much as we like to think about being disciples as the life of light burdens and easy yokes, is it really easy or free from burdens? How many of you were promised a life with a bowl full of cherries without the pits? Get my point? Being a disciple today, even today, costs a lot. Time, energy, funding, and many, many, many nights of prayer, and sometimes nights of sleeplessness, tossing and turning. The thing is, for some of those gathered that day with Jesus, it really did cost them their lives. For those 11 disciples who witnessed the resurrection, only one got to see and live to a natural death. The remaining 10 died from being stabbed, tortured, beaten, crucified, drawn, and quartered. They did not die pleasant deaths. They became martyrs for their faith. And this is the kind of person that I think Jesus was really trying to weed out of those crowds that were following him. He wanted to mold disciples like a potter molds clay so that they could stand in the face of adversity and persevere through any challenge that they face. Here's what he says, just to clearly put it in perspective for us. Anyone who comes to me but refuses to let go of father, mother, spouse, children, brothers, sisters, yes, even one's own self, cannot be my disciple. Anyone who comes to him and cannot let go of the other things of life can't be his disciple. And yes, a man who taught about compassion and love for all is talking about refusing others. And what this means, at least what I think it means at this point in my life, is that we need to be willing to give 100% of ourselves to the life of being a disciple, putting being a follower of Christ above all other things in our lives. We need to be able to set aside all of our foolish needs and need only to have God's love in our lives. Now, do not mishear me either. We need to put our love of God first and love for others second. That is what Jesus commands. It does not mean that we are to abandon our loved ones, but that our love for God should be greater. With me? Okay. Because it does not get any better from here or easier for us to grasp either. Because Jesus takes it one step further. He says, and if you do not carry your own cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. If you do not carry your own cross. Now, for each of us, that cross is going to be and look different. For general purposes, though, he's referring to all of those who were closest to him and how they too would die. Remember what I said about the other 10? All 10 of them died by crucifixion in one form or another. All 10 of them died on the cross, just as Christ did. In referencing his own impending death, he also knew that his beloved disciples, his friends who had followed him closely for 3 years, too would soon die, with at least 5 of them dying in strange ways on the cross. Now, stopping there for a moment, let's get some perspective here. Those who followed him around that day were likely excited about the Messiah's arrival, right? They knew what they were looking for. They were ready for it. They likely wanted to follow him for the rest of their lives, and why wouldn't they? There was excitement. I mean, it's likely that those who were following him were happy and joyous and celebrating many things. It was a great feeling. Yet they did not understand that there was going to be a cost to their following him as well. And so in the very next breath, Jesus offers them a warning. But not doing so would have been unrealistic. He says, don't begin until you count the costs. And he uses the example of constructing a building. Don't begin until you count the cost. He truly only wanted the people who are totally committed to this until the end. Let me say that again. Jesus only wants people who are truly committed to the very end. Jesus wants disciples who realize, recognize, and acknowledge that following him may cost them their lives. He wants those who are going to commit their lives to being the best that they can be, but also to being his hands, his feet, his voice, when he is no longer physically present with them. He wants to know that those who stand with him that day will continue to stand against oppression, tyranny, and prejudice to defend God's love. Now, this is not the same Potter that we typically think of, but in all actuality, we should be expecting this kind of Jesus at this time in his life. I mean, I can imagine for him knowing that in a very short time, whether that's days, weeks, months, that he is going to suffer great persecution, great pain, and even greater death. He knows that his dearest friends are going to abandon him when he needs them the most, at his time of greatest need. He knows that the man he deigned to be the leader of the church will deny even knowing him 3 times to save his own skin out of fear. These are the men who spent 3 years following him every day, in and out, walking beside him, giving up all that they had and all that they would be to be with him. And even they are going to do things out of fear to save their own skins, when most of them will also die in a similar way as to his. And so that makes me think and wonder, how willing are we to put ourselves in a position to be molded the way Jesus truly wants us to be? Now, I'm guessing since crucifixion is outlawed in every country of this world, that none of us will face that same death. But there is a chance that we may need to stand up for our faith someday, whether that be to defend our beliefs in an ordination interview or as an interview to become a pastor of a church. Just saying. But more likely that at some point in our lives, we are going to need to be able to describe why we believe what we believe. And it might actually be to our children, our grandchildren, maybe a niece or a nephew. And honestly, we should all be able to answer that question and say at least one thing about why we follow Christ. See, today, even today, discipleship has a cost. It may cost us time in volunteering for a church event or a program with the presbytery. Maybe our cost is in providing leadership in worship or singing in the choir. Maybe our cost is in providing training for the next generation or the generations to come as we teach them about Christ and his life. My hope is that whatever the cost that God calls you to pay and to give, you recognize and realize that the cost we pay will be worth it as God continues to mold us, even when we crumble into a pile of gooey, slimy mess because we're afraid. We feel lost. The thing is, God loves us. God's love is ours, and it is God's love that sustains us. We can become better disciples, but that likely will cost even more. But I'm also fairly certain that it'll be worth it. It'll be far more worth it than we can ever imagine. Amen.